There is a fundamental and important work by Einstein and Rosen, thanks to which the concept of the world as two identical sheets of space connected by short junction tubes appeared for the first time in theoretical physics history. Such connections between areas of space were called Einstein-Rosen bridges. Nowadays, they're most often referred to as wormholes. And in sci-fi, this is a favorite way for fast travel between far-spaced points of the universe. However, the paper by Einstein and Rosen was devoted not to wormholes for spaceships at all, but to a new description of the nature of matter and elementary particles. They were the first, but not the only ones who hypothesized that our world could be dual. Another genius physicist, Paul Dirac, developed this idea in his original theory of the existence of a hypothetical world. This idea, of course, has a lot of historical references, such as Giordano Bruno's theory of the coincidence of contraries, as well as the belief held by certain schools of Indian philosophy that the universe has two separate realities, and countless other philosophical concepts that describe opposite but interconnected forces. The famous Dirac equation describing the behavior of an electron in an external force field is rightfully considered not only the most amazing magic of this great theorist, but also one of the most significant equations in physics, and as it turned out later, a fundamentally important equation for mathematics. When it provided a complete explanation of hydrogen's atomic emission spectrum, this equation was very quickly accepted by the physical community as the fundamental equation for the electron. But as it turned out, the most exciting thing was that this same equation contains much more than what Dirac was initially looking for. The most outstanding feature of the Dirac equation was its extremely unusual fourfold mathematical structure, which allows it to predict highly unexpected and strange things. At first, this seemed to be a big problem. But soon enough, a positron predicted by its math as an electron antiparticle was actually discovered in cosmic radiation. This became a true triumph for Dirac and his equation. But there was still a problem after all this grand success, though. According to the Dirac equation, for every solution with positive energy in nature, for example an electron, there is a counterpartner with negative energy, which is interpreted as antimatter. In real life, though, we clearly observe only one half in a stable form, are particles of matter, while the particles of the second half, antimatter, instantly annihilate. That is, they are mutually destroyed upon contact with the matter of our world. How is it possible, then, that in conditions of annihilation, only one of the halves always remains? Could it be because we are asking the wrong question? As the Dirac equation shows, the world of nature indeed consists of two symmetrical halves, but the other half of the world is no less stable than ours because it is not antimatter at all. If we imagine the geometry of space as a one-sided surface, then both halves of the world are actually the same universe. It was a kind of a theory that Dirac developed by the spring of 1941, and in June, despite the war that was already raging in Europe, a great chance came up to present it publicly to colleagues from the scientific community. That year, Dirac was invited to give a Bakerian lecture, which was very honorable among British academics. He proposed an original and beautiful solution, but it raises big questions about the interconnection of such things with the generally accepted concepts in the science of physical reality. In the Dirac model, the probabilities could well be negative, along with negative energies for particles. He explained to the audience that negative energies and probabilities should not be rejected as meaningless nonsense at all. Dirac reminded that in mathematics, such concepts have actually been well developed for a long time, since they are very useful in calculations. For example, everyone who has a basic understanding of finance can well imagine a negative amount of money, which in reality no one has ever seen. Similar to this, physical equations expressing important properties of energies and probabilities can still be used in cases where they operate with quantities with negative values. In other words, negative probabilities and energies should be considered simply as things that exist somewhere else but do not appear in the experimental results of the actual world. It's clear that a next question arises. If negative energies and probabilities are not observed in the actual world, then where can they exist? As an answer, Dirac put forward his idea of a so-called hypothetical world. That is, another world that complements ours and which contains all those states of negative energy that are necessary for the theory and that are not observed in the actual world. According to his colleagues, the new concept of the hypothetical world looked physically feasible, but highly unusual and even mystical. The mysterious magic of the mathematical part was impressive, though. Wolfgang Pauli, famous in these circles for his strict criticism and very harsh assessments, took Dirac's Bakerian lecture with uncharacteristic enthusiasm and even wrote a special letter to him with warm words of approval and support. The initial enthusiasm quickly faded away, though. Either the time was not right or for some other reason, but this idea did not receive support from any of the other prominent theorists. Moreover, today there are quite distinct attempts to pretend that Dirac had no such theory about a hypothetical coexisting world at all. During the first post-war years, thanks to the efforts of young theorists, a new quantum electrodynamics was born. The updated theory saved particle physics from serious problems with infinites and divergences in the equations, and began to give extremely accurate predictions at the output, strikingly coinciding with the data of experimental results. This was the first block that was laid in the foundation of the standard particle model. But it didn't work for Paul Dirac, and he did not accept the new theory. He disliked a lot of things about it, and in his opinion, the idea of a naked electron as a point was profoundly incorrect. That is, the concept of an elementary electric charge considered in isolation from the electromagnetic field. In order to get rid of such an erroneous entity and find the root cause of failures, Dirac decided to return to the origins of the classics, to Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism, and to the conceptual foundations on which they were created. And it should be remembered that these foundations had the concept of ether as an all-pervading thin matter, the concept of the field as a tense state of ether, and the concept of electric charge as a local oscillating excitation of the field. As a first thing, Dirac decided to deduce a new classical theory of the electron in such a way that in the equations the electric charge of the electron does not appear as a separate entity at all. Technically, this task turned out to be solved. He emphasized that his new theory is no longer a theory of point charges, but operates with continuous flows of electrical energy. In fact, according to Dirac's interpretation, the most remarkable feature of this new quantum theory of electromagnetism turned out to be the concept of a universal, all-pervading ether that was returning to modern physics. But in the early 50s, when he put forward these new ideas, any talk about the long-rejected theory of the ether was considered as a backward idea. After all, the modern science community knew perfectly well that the victory of Einstein's special theory of relativity finally and irrevocably canceled the ether, so that since the 20s, this concept was actually withdrawn from physics. At the same time, almost no one wanted to admit the fact that Einstein's general theory of relativity, which appeared a dozen years after the special one, quite clearly declared excessive haste with the cancellation of the ether. For example, the so-called empty vacuum space itself has specific physical characteristics such as geometric shape and energy. In other words, it cannot be understood as empty at all, and Albert Einstein himself back in 1919 was the first to talk about the return of ether to physics. Dirac published a whole series of works where he provided a detailed conceptual and mathematical justification for the fact that the attraction of ether is very useful for the new physics, and that as a very light and thin form of matter, it can exist in quantum mechanics in complete harmony with the relativity principles. Moreover, if we accept the idea of the ether not as a dedicated fixed frame of reference that was rejected in the special theory of relativity, but as another form of matter with the corresponding dynamics and particle velocity distribution, then other previously rejected things naturally return to physics. In particular, the ideas of absolute time and absolute simultaneity of events. 4 years later, Nobel laureate Wolfgang Pauli made his major discovery, and there are very good reasons to believe that it would not only beautifully complement Dirac's natural philosophy theory, but also give it exactly what it was lacking previously: new physical ideas. The key essence of these ideas can be distilled down to a single Pauli's phrase, quote, "division and reduction of symmetry." This, then, the kernel of the brute. The second part of the phrase, originally written in German to Heisenberg, is taken from a scene in Faust, during which a black poodle follows Faust home and transforms into a wandering scholar, who is actually Mephistopheles, the devil in disguise. Faust then realizes that the hidden was in the obvious. Pauli explained this further, pointing to the fact that the original meaning of the German word doubt, used in Goethe's tragic play, meant once a division into two. In the follow-up letter a week later, Pauli was leaving another key to his discovery by referring to some kind of his own anti-symmetry. Quote, "The picture keeps shifting all the time. Everything is in flux. Nothing for publication yet, but it's all bound to turn out magnificently. No one can tell what marvels will appear. Wish me luck. I am learning to walk. Enough for today." This is powerful stuff. The cat is out of the bag and has shown its claws. Division and symmetry reduction. I have gone out to meet it with my anti-symmetry. I gave it fair play, whereupon it made its quietus. Alas, this key was immediately lost, since only Werner Heisenberg knew about it, and he did not understand the mysterious meaning of these phrases himself. Moreover, he did not tell others about them for a long time. For an adequate perception of Pauli's ideas, it is necessary to remember that dreams played a huge role in his life. He paid close attention to them, always wrote them down, analyzed them, and then tried to project them into his physical and theoretical research. The impulse for the beginning of the study we are interested in, which ended with a grand discovery, was one of Pauli's dreams, in which he saw twins, a boy and a girl, similar to each other to such an extent that he got the feeling that shortly before they were one person. And this was not the first hint to focus on the idea of doubling. In another consonant dream, an Asian woman performed a kind of a dance on a spiral staircase connecting two parallel levels. By keeping moving up and down in a spiral, she managed to convey to Pauli by the language of dance that in fact there is no difference between top and bottom, and that in reality there is one level here, but forked. If we superimpose this dream on the theoretical construction known as the Einstein-Rosen bridge, it is easy to see that the model of a particle proposed by Einstein as a bridge between two coexisting worlds receives a significant addition. According to the explanations of the dancer from Pauli's dream, the connection is not just a static tunnel, but a more complex dynamic system that, along with the rotation of the particle, also provides its constant movements or harmonic vibrations from one surface to another. Starting from here, it's quite logical to move on to the mathematical constructions of Paul Dirac. For example, to the Dirac equation, which describes a Bispinor particle constantly jumping between two states. And also to the fact that the mathematically convenient hypothetical world of Dirac in this context becomes the second half of the forked universe. Now, we should return to the fundamental work of Einstein and Rosen, who first presented the concept of the world as two identical sheets of space connected by interdimensional tunnels. Now, it should be noted that this work title was The Particle Problem in the General Theory of Relativity, and it gave a substantially new description for the nature of elementary particles of matter. The novelty was in the idea that a particle is not a point, but a neck of a microscopic tube connecting our space with a second coexisting one. This tube is a kind of bridge that we can call a wormhole. But in the Einstein-Rosen paper, the wormhole had the property to be non-traversable. It is a very unstable passage and gets destroyed very fast. And so what can you do with a wormhole if you can't put anything through it? And it turns out that's because the authors didn't put it into quantum physics. Now, same year, another paper, commonly referred to as EPR by Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen, was published. It was about quantum entanglement, or what Einstein called a spooky action at a distance, something he was not happy with. Entanglement is a property of subatomic particles to act as a twin, even if you take them apart to the different edges of the universe. They hold information, and if you measure the one, you know what the other would be. Now, at that time, there was no reason to think about these two papers that they had anything to do with one another. Only in 2013, Maldacena and Susskind proposed that wormhole, ER, equals quantum entanglement, EPR, and that they are obviously the same. That was totally unexpected. So the basic idea was that when you have a quantum entanglement between two particles, necessarily there would be a wormhole connecting them. People are fascinated about wormholes as an exotic configuration of space-time, and many were speculated if they could actually work. In 2019, Jafferis and Gao came up with a solution to this problem. One of the magical things of quantum mechanics is that you can have a negative energy, and this allows you to do the things that otherwise were impossible. The kind of things that Dirac previously envisioned with his hypothetical world idea. What was shown is that if you introduce a negative energy shockwave, you would support your wormhole and get something from one end to come out the other. November 2022, Santa Barbara, California. The team, led by Maria Spirapulo of the California Institute of Technology, implemented the novel wormhole teleportation protocol using Google's quantum computer, a device called Sycamore. The team set out to create a wormhole in the lab based on Daniel Jeffress's traversable wormhole protocol. They hope to design a quantum circuit that's mathematically equivalent to a wormhole. If successful, it would be the first experimental demonstration of a wormhole equals quantum entanglement. The experiment was successful. What happened was the qubits of the Google quantum computer were making a little bit of extra space, and that's our wormhole. A pulse of negative energy fell into the wormhole, and now it became traversable. It opened. They put a qubit from one side of the wormhole. Once the qubit is in the interior of it, that information actually spreads to the entire quantum system. This spread of quantum information becomes shared through many particles and forms the quantum entanglement, and then remarkably refocused into the single qubit. And then, as the wormhole is closing, the qubit is exiting. So now we have first experimental results for bridges that can connect our world with a hypothetical world. And these are traversable, and that besides indicating deep aspects of reality that science has not mastered yet. And as it always has been in physics, as our tools evolve, more powerful quantum computers might be able to look more deeply into highly entanglement matter. This line of thinking might even take us towards an explanation of where the universe came from. Latham Boyle has been working with Neil Turok, his colleague at the Perimeter Institute, on what they call a two-sheeted universe that involves a set of symmetries known as charge, parity, and time. In this hypothesis, the Big Bang is a kind of mirror separating our half of the universe from its mirror antimatter image on the other side of the Big Bang. This model suggests the existence of an anti-universe paired with ours, and where time runs backwards. The anti-universe will stretch back in time from the Big Bang, getting bigger and bigger, and it will be dominated by antimatter, or, as was predicted by Dirac, be the world saturated by positrons, and its spatial properties will be inverted compared to those in our half. The situation is similar to the creation of electron-positron interaction in a vacuum. Now, theoretically, in normal conditions, anti-humans from antimatter will never be able to be present in our reality, since when antimatter comes into contact with our matter, mutual annihilation occurs. But what if there was a way and technology that allows to travel in between? A technology that will be based on the fundamental nature of particles as wormholes, bridges, that connect and hold these two sheets of the same forked universe. So, the idea of Paul Dirac about a hidden but coexisting world might become not just hypothetical one day, and maybe lost keys to the big discovery of Wolfgang Pauli will be found again.
I feel very buoyant and light and resilient. I feel as though this chair is not as solid as it seems to be. I have a feeling that my hands are not resting against this chair, and I see flashes of color quite a bit. Somehow or other, I think that I'd like to rescue myself from the idea that there's so many different realities here. Somehow I feel an observer.
Why do you do that now?
Well, the square is the ordinary rectangle, you see. It's one of the perfect means. So I think that's what I would like to do. I'd like to find out what reality I'm in.
The notion that a world of consciousness and a world of matter are absolutely separate and are those that do not intersect is considered to be true in the views of most scientists to this day. But at the same time, a lot of people both in science and outside of it intuitively feel that there is something extremely artificial in such separation. That unity was something that the famous theoretical physicist Wolfgang Pauli tried to find. And what he was looking for was not just anti-people from the hidden sheet of reality. He was looking for an answer to where in this new emerging picture of the forked universe was a place for human consciousness. Being well aware of the unorthodoxy of his ideas, Pauli did not disclose them in scientific publications, but he regularly discussed the future merge of matter and consciousness into a coherent picture in private conversations. Quote, "In my personal opinion, in the future science, reality will be neither psyche nor physical, but somehow both of them at once, and neither one or the other separately at the same time." And if you inquire about his biography, including a very unusual collaboration with the father of analytical psychology, Carl Jung, it will be easy to find more than just interesting things. For example, things like Pauli's essay he sent to Jung once. In this essay, a rather unusual attempt is made to find a way to describe nature in a way that would uniformly unite physics and consciousness on certain archetypal foundations. He believed that archetypes are present not only in dreams and the active imagination of people, but can be expressed in modern scientific terms and concepts. For example, according to Bohm's concept, the world of reality that we live in is structured in a way that every existing thing is hidden in each of its component parts. The starting point for the scientist's reasoning was the famous Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox, which clearly manifests the concept of the inseparable unity of the quantum world. Now, just to remember, the essence of the EPR paradox is that quantum entangled particles behave strictly in a mutually consistent manner. That is, any change in the state of one particle leads to an instantaneous change in the other, no matter how far it is from its twin. Bohm was reflecting on this mystery, which contradicts not only common sense, but also Einstein's theory of relativity, which imposes strict restrictions on the speed of propagation of interactions. He came to the conclusion that elementary particles interact at any distance, not because they exchange mysterious signals among themselves, but because their separation is an illusion. In other words, entangled particles are not separate objects at all, but in fact extensions of something more integral and fundamental at some deeper level of reality. Jung's mystical ideas about the collective unconscious as an invisible world common to all people that is inhabited by souls and structured by archetypes cannot be proved with scientific rigor yet. According to Jung, the inner world of an individual is not controlled by sexual impulses and the desire for pleasure only, but has the same degree of freedom as the external reality. dreams and hallucinations, fanatical beliefs and manic ideas, all kinds of phobias and the like, are all examples of autonomous processes in human consciousness that manifest various aspects of psyche energy. And it was these ideas that provided the basis for Pauli for an analysis of his own dreams that had very specific physical concepts in them, albeit expressed in an extremely strange context. Specifically, Pauli's dreams related to physics are of particular interest, and some are known to us from published Jung books and their private correspondence. The first thing that immediately caught Pauli's attention when he was trying to analyze them was the obvious discrepancy between the images and the dream's content to the established Jungian theories about the work of the unconscious. According to Jung's ideas, dreams represent the pure nature of the collective soul, which works as a self-regulating system and compensates for the limits of human consciousness by transmitting initially known information to it with the help of established archetypal images of the mythological type. But in Pauli's dreams related to physics, something significantly different was happening. Usually, everything looked as if really knowledgeable people were trying to convey clues to the problems on which he was working. At the same time, modern scientific and mathematical apparatus was unknown to them. For instance, in one of such dreams, a man who looks like Einstein drew several vertical straight lines on the blackboard, which he then crossed at right angle with another horizontal line. Pauli understood that the teacher was trying to convey to him the idea of the one-dimensionality of quantum physics, behind which there is a deeper multidimensional reality. Trying to interpret this dream in the style of Jungian psychoanalysis, Pauli gives this interpretation of it. Quote, "This showed me that quantum mechanics and the so-called official physics as a whole are a one-dimensional slice of a two-dimensional, more meaningful world, the second dimension of which can only be the unconscious and archetypes." Jung himself always proposed archetypes as structuring principles for the unconscious only, but Pauli began to lean towards the idea that they are also the basic principles for structures and processes in the physical world. As another very important milestone pointing in the same direction, Pauli considered the ancient works of alchemists who tried to comprehend the mysteries of the world through the unity of spirit and matter. Here, Pauli was in complete agreement with Carl Jung, who made a long-standing discovery that attention to the mysterious texts of the alchemists of China and Europe opens up a picture of their experiments not only with different chemicals in the laboratory, but also with different components in the complex structure of their own consciousness. In modern psychology, these ideas began to be approached again by noting the similarity of the properties of consciousness with the concepts of quantum mechanics. In the article in Frontiers in Psychology, the group of authors noted the following, quote, "This review examines phenomena that apparently contradict the notion that consciousness is exclusively dependent on brain activity, including phenomena where consciousness appears to extend beyond the physical brain and body in both space and time. The mechanisms underlying these non-local properties are vaguely suggestive of quantum entanglement in physics, but how such effects might manifest remains highly speculative. The existence of these non-local effects appears to support the proposal that post-materialistic models of consciousness may be required to break the conceptual impasse presented by the hard problem of consciousness. In this regard, quantum entanglement, non-locality, and the secrets of the structure of our forked universe, as well as the place of consciousness in it, can be combined directly through the concept of a quantum computer.
I do not know what part of what reality, again, this feeling comes over me of almost like the singing, you know, but I think it's the soundtrack or the film going through the machine.
Moreover, what if human consciousness itself is the result of a kind of quantum computer hidden in the brain? Some scientists further suggest that consciousness generally goes beyond the familiar layer of material reality, such as Roger Penrose, the Nobel laureate in physics. In his works, He talks a lot about quantum consciousness. According to Penrose, the entire human consciousness is impossible to calculate. It is fundamentally uncountable. And in physics, objects whose behavior is impossible to calculate exactly are the entities that obey quantum mechanics. He also believes that because of quantum mechanisms, there is a separate psyche reality embedded in the physical reality. If true, a big problem arises right here. In this article, the author emphasizes that, in fact, Penrose's model removes the physical ban on various kinds of occult and psychic practices. Quote, "In fact, if consciousness is not the result of psychological processes in brain, but a separate reality with its own space-time, then according to the methods of theoretical physics, the only thing needed is to create an operator that will ensure mutual transformations of mental and physical spacetimes. And with the help of such an operator, psyche reality will directly affect physical reality." Someone will say that such an operator has been working for 1,000,000 years. These are the skillful hands of representatives of the Homo sapiens, who embody all sorts of invented things. However, this is not about this, not about the use of intermediaries in the form of a human body. Now here, it would be interesting to see if it is possible to do some experiments to prove such a theory. The author of the article gives a detailed overview of several physical models and studies that develop this idea from the side of physics. A very interesting study published by Christian Kerskens and David Perez. They did not put forward hypotheses about the essence of the quantum machine of consciousness. Instead, they used the postulate that if there are two known quantum systems, then some unknown quantum system interacting with them can ensure the creation of an entangled state. In their opinion, the known systems are water molecules, precisely the proton spins of bulk water, and the unknown system is some kind of process in the brain. The researchers report that they have selected such operating conditions of the NMR installation that have suppressed all signals associated with classical correlations of hydrogen spins, and therefore the signal is possible only from quantum effects. And they managed to detect such a signal. Quote, "Our findings suggest that we may have witnessed entanglement mediated by consciousness-related brain functions. Those brain functions must then operate non-classically, which would mean that consciousness is non-classical." Moreover, during their research, it comes as a surprise that in a dream state, a person's consciousness works not less but more intensively. Now, a few more different quotes will be of interest to us. "But a programmer who controls quantum consciousness remains completely out of sight. In computer theory, a programmer writes a program, sets the quantum states of qubits, and forms their superposition. Further, changing the states of the qubits, performs some logical and computational operations, and eventually finds out which superposition came out. In the brain, as follows from the models, a programmer is not visible and everything happens quite randomly. Of course, if we take Penrose's point of view, if we assume that the quantum process in the brain is controlled by the structure of space-time itself, or even by the force behind this structure, we can form some idea of a programmer. Staying within the framework of materialism, though, it would be great to find other explanations and mechanisms. And there are hopes for this, since the idea of quantum consciousness has been formulated. And not only formulated, the first models have already been created, some experimental material has been collected, which may indicate that such an idea is not unreasonable. Therefore, by virtue of the axiom of the unstoppability of the process of cognition, someday we will still learn about the details of the mechanism and about a programmer who controls consciousness through a quantum system." End of quote. A very interesting angle is provided by information theory and a parallel school of thought called bioinformation. Information theory was first articulated by Claude Shannon. He realized that intelligent machines could be built out of simple logic junctions with binary yes-no answers. Crucially, his view was what laid a base for development of modern computers. But more importantly for us is that he put information theory into practice by building intelligent machines that helped us to reassess what counts as intelligence. We began to see our own intelligence in a new light, less as a series of chemical reactions as was previously thought by biologists, and more as the processing and communication of information. Eventually, it was discovered that the current flows across membranes were what mattered, and that energy usage had structure and direction. In other words, it transmitted triggering information. It was David Bohm who moved the concept of information forward into a whole new dimension and brought us closer to understanding the role of quantum properties of plasmas involved in processes of consciousness. Bohm noted some of the bizarre behavior described in quantum mechanics in the common human experience of consciousness. This is important because human brains, like quantum computers, contain complex plasma, and plasma may be a medium by which uncertain and bizarre quantum phenomena enter the human experience. It was later in time when researchers like Viktor Inyushin revealed that he discovered the complex cold plasma in the body that he called bioplasma, and that it appears to be concentrated in the brain and the spinal cord. It is also interesting that while solving challenges of quantum computation and retaining a system memory, researchers come up with a cold plasma as a solution as well. In this article, the results of an experiment are described in which they create an ultra-cold plasma. Such plasma has a very important property. It self-assembles and forms robust structures. Moreover, the plasma quenches to achieve this state naturally, without needing a web of laser fields, and is stable. Just as importantly, the system doesn't have to start at a temperature near absolute zero. The mechanism of self-assembly operates naturally at high temperature, seemingly leading to a spontaneous state of preserving memory of the system. This discovery can give us a hint on unique properties of a cold bioplasma that works in the hot environment of our body too. It was theorized by Bohm that there must be some underlying field or dimension that was interacting with particles in plasma, resulting in life and a form of intelligence. This vision of intelligence in plasma became a paradigm for David Bohm as he developed a scientific and philosophical account of the universe as hologram. Could such an underlying interacting dimension be the hidden world of the unconscious and archetypes in our forked universe? Now, returning to the question on how such non-local properties like the ability of consciousness to extend beyond the physical brain and body in both space and time might manifest, one can ask, can things like remote viewing, out-of-body movements, or even life after death be one of the many manifestations of non-local properties of consciousness? The answer is hazed by the major problem of mainstream science. And it is not only because it stubbornly continues to assert that human consciousness is exclusively a product of the brain and disappearing with the death of the body. A much more serious problem is that apart from the mainstream, we also have a secret science, where scientists have been actively exploring non-local and officially non-existent properties of consciousness for a long time, exploring them secretly and without sharing such developments openly with society and the world for matters of national security. However, some declassified documents allow us to peek behind a curtain of secrecy of three-letter agencies on what is happening in the so-called secret science. The unclassified documents from the archives of intelligence services consistently surprise researchers. Usually, these surprises are for various historians who then revise the events of the known history. But sometimes it happens that one should revise a scientific model of the world. Without going into conspiracy theories, one can find a lot of evidence that approximately after the Second World War, the humanity of our planet has two significantly different sciences. One is the open science or mainstream, as it believes already knows almost everything about the world around, but basically is not capable of giving answers to the simplest questions, like who are we? Why are we here? Where are we heading? And there is also a fundamentally different science, the so-called secret. Within it, scientists seem to be well aware that we still need to learn a lot of very, very important things about the real structure of the world in which we all live. For example, there is a document from the Secret Archive which was called Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process, and it tells no less about the universal hologram of the cosmic superintelligence in the foundations of the world in general, and how this fact of nature can be used by spies for the practical needs of intelligence work in particular. June 9, 1983. On this day, a report appears in which an employee of the U.S. Army Intelligence Service, Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonnell, investigated Robert Monroe's audio technologies in detail. While working on the report, he had to plunge not only into physiology, but also into aspects of quantum mechanics to explain the nature of consciousness. The document itself, as the author states, is not designed to be the last word on the subject, and aims to bring the whole phenomenon of out-of-body states into the language of physical science, to remove the stigma of its occult connotations, and put it in a frame of reference suited to objective assessment. As indicated in the document, the Gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space. The participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers. This technology is based on the binaural beat process. The reason for this is physiological. Each ear is hardwired, so to speak, to both hemispheres of the brain. Each hemisphere has its own sound processing center, which receives signals from each ear. In this physiological structure, there are not one but two electrochemical synaptic waves present, one in each hemisphere, which allows to sync both hemispheres and access altered states of consciousness. In fact, this technology reminds of an ancient method used by shamans and which was described by Castaneda in one of his books. Of course, there are different opinions about the nature of his works, but it's interesting that in one of the chapters, he describes two shamans standing at both sides of the author, synchronously whispering specially selected spells into his ears, and as a result induced him to an altered state of consciousness. Now, as stated in this scientific paper, if the human brain is exposed to one frequency in the left ear, which is 10 Hz below another audible frequency played in the right ear, rather than hearing either of the two audible frequencies, the brain chooses to hear the difference between them, called a binaural beat. The brain is able to pick up this beat and mirror its own rhythm with it. After that, an individual consciousness operates in a similar to altered state that then allows people to acquire new information intuitively. Moreover, this technology helps to achieve such altered states much faster and relies on modern technical achievements. When during such sessions, the experimenter receives practical personal experience in extracting information in an unusual, purely intuitive way, and also gets samples of new unexpected information, then it inevitably comes to an additional research on how and why does all this work at all. In the section titled The Consciousness Matrix, the report states the following, quote, "The universe is composed of interacting energy, some at rest and some in motion. It is, in and of itself, one gigantic hologram of unbelievable complexity. According to the theories of Karl Pribram, neuroscientist at Stanford University, and David Bohm, a physicist of the University of London, the human mind is also a hologram which attunes itself to the universal exchange, thereby deducing meaning and achieving the state which we call consciousness." End of quote. During further research, it inevitably turned out that some people have always been able to achieve such specific states throughout the known history of humankind. That is, there have always been people who not only knew how to get a lot of valuable information intuitively, but also present the information they received in clear concepts and terms that were available to them in the corresponding period of history. The report continues to describe all these things in close conjunction with the religious and philosophical inquiries of the mystics of antiquity till the last parts, until it gradually approaches page 25. Quote, "The classic description of the universal hologram is to be found in a Hindu sutra which says, 'In the heaven of Indra there is said to be a network of pearls so arranged that if you look at one, you see all the others reflected in it.'" Now, I've cited this quotation because it shows that the concept of the universe, which at least some physicists are now coming to accept, is identical in its essential aspects with the one known to the learned elite in selected civilizations and cultures of high attainment in the ancient world. Energy in this state of inactive infinity is termed by physicists as energy in its absolute state, or simply the absolute. Between the absolute and the material universe, in which we experience our physical existence, are various intervening dimensions to which human consciousness in altered states of being may gain access. Theoretically, human consciousness may continue to expand the horizons of its perceptual capability until it reaches the dimension of the absolute, at which point perception stops because the absolute generates no holograms of or about itself. In order to attain self-consciousness, the consciousness of the absolute must project a hologram of itself and then perceive it. That hologram is a mirror image of the absolute in infinity, still exists outside time and space, but is one step removed from the absolute and is the actual agent of all reality." End of quote. Approximately here, the declassified report suddenly breaks off in mid-sentence at the end of page 24, and then continues from page 26, where the final conclusion section of the document is. Page 25 is not just completely lost from the document in the CIA version, but according to the assurances of the intelligence service, it was absent there from the beginning. To our luck, the missing page was found where no one had ever thought to look for it, in the archives of the Monroe Institute. Quote from the missing page 25. "Finally, our description of the universal hologram, the torus of creation and evolution, is neither new nor original. Its use as the figure of the universe, of creation developing and evolution, is found in various stylized representations in virtually every religious system of antiquity, whether of Eastern or Western derivation. Whether it's the stylized labyrinth once popular in the Hellenic world, the spiralized version of the Hebrew tree of life or its Hindu counterpart, or the Chinese spiral through the fourfold powers, the ultimate meaning is the same. Mystics the world over, it seems, have perceived the universal hologram in the same spiral form and have incorporated that intuitive knowledge in their religious writings from antiquity to the present." End of quote.
I feel as though there's some very definite driving meaning in it, and there's a spiraling arrow going to its mark. And I feel that everyone here is conscious of that feeling.
Is it some sort of an influence?
Yes.
It's interesting that in modern science, the concept of a universal hologram is also used to describe how emergent space-time can work. Juan Maldacena, its discoverer, has described it as a theoretical universe in a bottle. In his model, our universe is dual. If we think about it as a spherical-shaped bottle, then the space-time filling the region inside the bottle, its interior sheet, a continuum that bends and undulates, producing the force called gravity, exactly maps to a network of quantum particles living on the outside sheet, bottle's rigid gravity-free surface. The interior universe projects from the lower dimensional boundary system like a hologram. This lower dimensional boundary of the universe makes a holographic principle work and allows for correspondence to be a duality. In this model, individual particles from the Einstein-Rosen theory became kind of microscopical black hole bridges connecting two sheets of our forked universe. On the cosmic level, such bridges are black holes that connect to a soup of quantum particles or plasma on the second hidden sheet, and that physicists can learn about by studying them. It's interesting that in one of the mythological appearances of the king of the gods, Indra, who gave birth to the sun, sky, and dawn, there is extremely important detail. His whole body is covered with eyes. Isn't this image a kind of hint that the hypothesis of physicists, according to which all particles of matter are ultimately black holes? Particles holes that project holograms of everything and simultaneously absorb all the information about the life of our beautiful world through the eyes of Indra? According to the unclassified report, holographic principle and other concepts were the basis for the understanding of how and why gateway method seems to work, and how to use it with other advanced techniques, such as remote viewing, out-of-body states, information gathering from the past or the future. It also gave the first glimpse of the limitation of such techniques, as was outlined in the report that although individuals in that same state may travel anywhere on an instantaneous basis in either terrestrial or other spheres, the information distortion presented. Apparently, Monroe Institute conducted numerous experiments involving individuals moving from one coast to the other in the out-of-body state to read a series of 10 computer-generated numbers in a university laboratory. Although most have acquired enough of the digits to make clear that their consciousness was present, none have ever succeeded in getting all 10 correct. It is stated in the report that the reason for that could be some kind of noise generated by interference with other holographic patterns, or could be a noise inherent in any biological system. It's important to remember that analysis and assessment of gateway process is a detailed report addressed to the intelligence community with purely professional goals of improving the quality of espionage work in the conditions of our collective dream. And this is what the final part of the report called Conclusion reminds us about. Given the unique information of this section, it is important to point attention to the moments related to the inevitable contacts of psi-spies with out-of-body forms of mind, and to the methods of protection from the active influence of these forms, both on the operatives personally and on their missions and projects. Quote, "The most promising approach suggested in the foregoing study involves the following steps. Begin by using the gateway hemisync tapes to achieve enhanced brain focus and to induce hemisphere synchronization. Repeat step E to achieve facility in gaining out-of-body state under conscious control. Approach Focus 15 and 21 objectives. Escape from time-space and interact within new dimensions from out-of-body perspective. Use a multi-focus approach to solve the problem of distortion in terrestrial information gathering trips. This approach involves the use of 3 individuals in the out-of-body state, one viewing the target object here, in time-space, one viewing it at focus 15 as it slips into the immediate past, and one viewing at focus 21 as it slips from the immediate future. Their consciousness energy systems should resonate in sympathetic oscillation. They can tune in to the same target on different planes, dimensions, with greater effectiveness. Be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. Arrange to have groups of people in Focus 12 state unite their altered consciousness to build holographic patterns around sensitive areas to repulse possible unwanted out-of-body presences. Encourage more advanced gateway participants to build holographic patterns of successful attainment and rapid progress for advanced colleagues to assist them in progressing through the gateway system. If these experiments are carried through, it is to be hoped that we will truly find a gateway to gateway and to the realm of practical application for the whole system of techniques which comprise it. End of quote and report. This report was prepared for the U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command more than 40 years ago. What new accomplishments and discoveries have been achieved over this long period of time is still classified. It is clear that our science should not be schizophrenically split into open and secret, mainly because the answers to simple questions that are vital for any normal person but are insignificant and simply not interesting for the down-to-earth tasks of secret science. If the science of the military and intelligence agencies is concerned only with how to find out the intentions of the enemies, how to locate all of them faster and destroy more effectively, then it is probably obvious that it has absolutely no interest in who are we, why are we here, where are we heading questions. On the other hand, mainstream science, which seems to be open to everyone and everything, at the same time does not rush to see or feel the gigantic world of consciousness of the universe, and perhaps a kind of united consciousness in which we all live and are an essential part of.
I feel very benevolent. I mean, I feel as though I have no enemies in the world, and this is very lovely.
Do you feel
very fragile, delicate, lovely. And it goes and comes, you know. I mean, that one state there that was, I never experienced anything like that. It's marvelous.